out a little bit of time there in the previous, and hopefully we can line this up right here, or better yet, so you see this on the same page right here, where they say ancient Edomite metalworkers were elites, not slaves. All right, ancient Edomites. Now, who have we been saying, right, were the so-called Edomites? Now, why do they put this front and center as a related article with this statement that that cast doubt on a level of the Jews, right? You have to understand that there's a double game being played, right? And most of you don't recognize that because you've lost the balance in your mind. You be all emotional, like right-brained in this so-called black consciousness, or even in your so-called Hebrew Israelitish consciousness, right? And not really be more analytical, right? About and ask yourself, well, why are they putting this right out, right? And why are they speaking about these things? Now, someone's like Shaka Zulu, Shaka Amos would use this to seek to debunk, the primary claim of those who are of the Hebrew, I'll say the Hebrew consciousness, because see, we don't want to lock it into just these ones within the debate and that you might see on Sinetta TV, although sometimes he has a wide range of different ones and ones that come in on the couch or out on 125 or so forth and so on. So we want to just share that this is in the same article, or this is linked as a related article with this one right here, right? Concerning the Jews, and then they ask the question, where's the real proof? See, the fact is they found a lot of proof. They have found proof, but the proof, much of the proof, if they were to show it, and ones like ourselves and so many others would see it, they would basically connect the dots. Right? They've tried even to make some fake archaeology in Israel, so forth and so on. And some of it was actually proven to be fake, you understand, by others. And, you got to kind of look over that stuff now and see what they were faking, because no doubt they had found some real things that they wanted to share, but they didn't want to destroy it too much either. But because of the whole racial aspects with the so-called state of Israel and the Jews and who's a Jew and so forth and so on, right? You have to recognize that is the Achilles heel. So when you hear the black Hebrew Israelites speaking about Edom and Edomite, right, there is a relationship to that, because this is why they have this companion article over here. Right. I'm going to this one right here the first time with you. Hopefully, I'm gonna have to restart this computer, clicking the tabs, and it's a little slow. Might be this, this Google browsing window, but let's click this again. This is Haaretz, right? Archaeology. Would you trust them if they found that the black people, and not if, but we don't put it like a if. They already have found that. They already know that. Right? They already know that, right? This is one reason to kind of validate their claim, right? They basically brought in the Ethiopian Jews, or the Beta Israel of the tribe of Dan, so-called, of Ethiopia, right? They brought them in. Right. But even them bringing them in, many of the Ethiopian Jews, are beginning to learn what it's like to be a nigger, or to be treated like a nigger. And that's what's interesting. We got to put it like it is, right? Because this is about us, not just over here in the West, or just in the East, but also in the North and South, and in every land in which we have been scattered as a people. You see, they want to keep us in this compartmentalization, and that is a part of this spiritual Egypt bondage. You want to know what the spiritual Egypt is? Well, look at the back of a $1 bill, right? That's the sign. That's their sign and seal. Now, notice what it says right here. Ancient Edomite metalworkers were elites, not slaves. So they admit that there were Edomite metal workers, right? There were ancient Edomite metal workers Why do they do this? Because they're going to actually prove who they were, right? I mean, they already know who they are. And on this particular level, right, many of the Hebrew Israelites who do put forward a certain, Edom, Esau, Edomite, link, as well as the Khazar, the whole Khazarian thing. So we wanted to point to that. But here, let's get to this right here while we have time, right? And the Passover, the whole myth thing. Because this is a couple of vids, a couple of VLEX later. We finally are going to touch on this part of it. We really want to bang on the first part of it, because you'll read something like this and, you will get caught in the trap. Because you'll read this and you won't say, well, why are they writing this like this? Were Jews ever really slaves in Egypt? Right? Were Jews ever really slaves? So they use this mythos, right, to steal the land, right, from the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They stole this from us. They divided our land. Right. So when you hear about all that racism going on among Africans, they say, oh, the Africans, many of them are Hebrews, man. And you're getting caught up on that COINTELPRO. But on the part about the myth, some people get offended at this terminology, a myth. But what we want to seek to do is we want to bottom out what myth means. Now, here in the Google, if you do search like this, I want to bring this down so you can see where we put myth and etymology. You'll see a page like this or a link like this will come up right here. Right? Where they're giving you a kind of a simple breakdown, but they're not really going into the word meaning. They're just showing you how the word itself morphed from Greek. Let's zoom in a little bit right here. From Greek, you see muthos, right? Then you have more in Latin, mythos, and then we have myth. Now it's very interesting because that means the Greek also comes out of the Kemet and out of the Coptic. And then you can now see a link as we're going to the real roots. So muthos, right? Muthos. But let's go right here to this link here. Let's bring this up so you can see this right here. This is, I really love this particular site right here, right? Because, we study etymology. You have to study etymology because words have, their etymological, their true word meaning, what it really means, getting back to the known and documented roots of the words and uses of it. And sometimes you'll find language like Ethiopic, which actually preserves a lot of that. Right. And this is the real link that we have and they use to revive Hebrew, but they leave that out. Right? But they bring in the Falashas. You have to understand that right there. The reasons why. And they take their manuscripts. They tell people publicly that, oh, the Ethiopian, it might be myth and it's not really authentic or this or that, but we're studying it. And they steal the people's manuscripts and they give them their modern Jewish, right, or Masoretic or Khazarian or Ashkenazi, rewrites. This is the same thing they do to y'all with the King James Bible. This is why it's significant for us to touch on this particular subject matter, when we talk about were the Jews ever really slaves in Egypt? No, they were not. But the Hebrews, right, who were Ethiopic peoples. Why do we say that? Because the Jews were of the race of the Ethiopians. There is the key link. This is the key. This is the missing link, brothers and sisters. So in discussing this myth, when people talk about myth, a lot of people dismiss myth. They say, oh, it's a myth. And then I ask them, well, what does the word myth really mean? They say, oh, a myth means like a fiction, like it's not true, like, something that was made up. Now, have they went and studied this? Or have they just kind of, just a derivative from their ignorance, right? From what we don't know. Instead of saying, I've heard the word and it seems like, or they make believe, or I think it is this, they assertively assert like this is what it is, right? And then when you go to look up the meaning, they'll say, oh, you're going to the white man's things, right? Not even recognizing that the original Greeks, right, were the Ionians and they were black peoples. And the human race is really the black race in the essence of it all has come from the black. So what they do is put forward evolution and say that so-called man came from a monkey. You know what I mean? Instead of that man or different ethnicities and nationalities have evolved properly and truly from ancient black peoples, right? They don't want to go there, right, with the knowledge. They don't want to go there with that, right? But let us go there, let us go there right here. Okay, some of these windows sticking here. We're going to have to bring that open. Okay, let's go over here and touch on it. All right, open this window here. Here we go. This is the page, right? This is the page, and we want to keep it as tight and as close as possible. Will this make it tighter so you can see the whole thing, and then you can pause it. Ones can pause it and read it. Good. It brings it in. It brings it in tight. Let's see what it says right here when we're talking about myth, right? When we're speaking about myth, right? Myth. Because a lot of people think myth is a bad thing. Myth is only a bad thing in the post-racial white supremacy mindset. And I'm going to prove it right here. Let's look at the etymology of the word myth from Online Etymology Dictionary. 1830, right? It says 1830 from French, mythe. Now, we already know let me just read through it right here, right? Mythe. So we have 1830, right? Myth, French for E, 1818, and directly from modern Latin, mythos or mythos. And it's from the Greek mythos. Really, it's from muthos. Remember, we just saw that muthos. So in the Greek, the U sound turned into a Y sound. I want you to note that, right? So not only does the letter change, but there's a certain pronunciation. Muthos. What does it mean? It means speech. You see this right here? I want to show you. So the root of so-called myth means speech, thought, story, myth, anything derived by word of mouth. So we're speaking about ancient oral, right? Either traditions of the griot or, things that you even heard in your own family. Do you disregard it? Unless you think that whoever's telling you your own people are liars. So you see what we're saying when we say those sort of things? We have to be very careful. Now, I want to show you this right here. This is what's really very interesting. So this gives you the root: speech, thought, story, myth. But what they don't disclose here, and we'll go into a little more in detail when we're touching on the mysteries. They say of unknown origin. We're going to give you the origin, right? In another VLEC, we'll give you the origin. They know the origin, or the origin is knowable. Let me put it like that. But they say it's of an unknown origin. Do you see that right there? Unknown origin. So we see that myth actually comes from, when we go to the oldest sources, right? The oldest sources, the primary sources for the meaning of words. Because a lot of people say, it's just a myth, and people will laugh it off and everything. But then they'll give you other oral stories and traditions, and they'll say this is true because they have confidence and they trust the particular chain of evidence, the chain of custody coming down to them. They trust that. If you have a story in your family that your mama told you, your papa told you, and their mama or papa told them, and so forth and so on, and somebody says that's a lie, do you think it's a lie because somebody outside your family tells you that? Now, here's where it gets, I'm not going to say, well, it doesn't get tricky for us when we're now talking about King James, and we're talking about a lot of these things that we're talking about, both from the Kemetic as well as from the Hebraic. But let's go in more into myth. We want to just open up myth right here, right? What does myth mean? Is myth a bad word, right? Is myth a bad word? I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to put the title. I want to put the title so as many real ones can check it out and can go and maybe do a better video, a better presentation, but at least you will have this evidence and you will know the truth for yourself, and will be very, I would say litigious, but we'll use discernment when we're using this particular word and when we're dismissing something as a myth. They say myths are, quote, stories about divine beings, generally arranged in a coherent system. They are revered as true and sacred. They are endorsed by rulers and priests and closely linked to religion. Once this link is broken and the actors in the story are not regarded as gods, but as human heroes, giants, or fairies, it is no longer a myth, but a folk tale. Isn't that interesting? So, isn't that interesting right there? A folk tale. Right? A folk tale where the central actor is divine, but the story is trivial. The result is religious legend, not myth. Now, I think that it's coming up. Now, this is from J. Simpson and S. Rude, Dictionary of English Folklore. It's Oxford, 2000, page 254. So what these individuals are giving you is a kind of a summary narrative of what they have been able to glean from the study of words, of these words and the original meaning of words, what we call etymology. Why etymology is so important for both Kemetic and Hebraic, right, and Black Hebrew scholarship, right? Etymology is important. I just want to stress that right there, and a couple of more vids, needs to be done. And some of y'all, if y'all inspired about this, you need to also, do your part according to the will of that which is true and right working in you, and through you. Now, you see the last part down here, right? I don't know how well you can see it. It's a little bit small right here. Right? But you see this right here, and let's actually zoom in right there, right? It says right here, the general sense of untrue story. That's where the word myth, right, takes on a general sense of being an untrue story or a rumor is from when? 1840. You notice this? As the word morphs more and more from its roots, right? And we can see the roots right there, muthos, right? As it goes more and more from its roots, right? In 1840, it becomes associated with an untrue story or rumor. But this explanation that's given from here to here, right, by J. Simpson and S. Rude is very interesting, because what they have sought to do, right, is to break this link, right? You see what it says in this particular explanation. I actually want to take a screenshot of it, because we start to talk about this too much, they'll come and they'll change it up. At least we'll have some evidence and document for this, right? This is very important. It says that now we know that the myths, right, coming out the Greeks, and the Greeks learned from Alexandria and from the Egyptians, as well as from the Hebrews. So they learned from both the Kemites and the Hebrews, but they were very juvenile, right? As Juvenile shows, right? They were very juvenile, immature, right? And also very disrespectful of this high knowledge that they became the appropriators of, right? So these myths, right? They came in and learned about our ancestors through speech, thought, through the stories, through the word of mouth, as they were introduced into the unknown origin or the mysteries, right? As Moses was learned in the wisdom schools. They learned stories about the divine beings, whether Kemetic or Hebraic, generally arranged in a coherent system, whether in the mystery schools in Egypt, the Library of Alexandria, or in the Hebrew, right? In the Hebrew temples and synagogues. We know there's a story of Alexander the Great going with it's a high priest and how he was recognized amongst them. And we also have the Ethiopic book of Alexander the Great, and there's a story there too that is very, very interesting, how he somehow gets connected with the Amen and the Amen cult and the priesthood. So we see that Kemetic, right, as well as that Hebraic, and how that connects with these stories, right, or these oral traditions. So we can call these myths oral traditions about our divine beings, generally arranged in a coherent system. That means not in Babylon, not in confusion, but in an order, right? They are revered as true and sacred because they were true and sacred. They are endorsed by rulers and priests, and we had real rulers and priests, and they were closely linked to our religion or to real spirituality, right? Once this link is broken, and that's what happened, the link is broken, and the actors in the story are not regarded as gods, right? Or Elohim, judges, or Neteru, right? But as human heroes, giants, or fairies, or make-believe. It's no longer a myth, but a folk tale. Right. So the link is broken, and therefore the myth, right? The mysteries become a folk tale. And when the central actor is divine, but the story is trivial, like most people's, Western Judeo-Christian Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this Anglo Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob mentality, then we have the result is a religious legend. So we have a lot of legends. Right? So the general sense of a myth being an untrue story or a rumor is from 1840. So I want you to note that. So anything that we are studying before 1840 and we say myth, we must think of it in its original context. And if we take it out of context, that's why we got so much nonsense as well as a lack of progress. Right? And therefore we are in the situation, right? We're in this, spiritual, right? We're in this, spiritual Egypt, right? Let's do this right here. I don't know how much time we have right here, but if we do have, more time, right? We want to show you how this all connects with, all this connects with mystery, right? With mystery, right? With the mysteries or the wisdom schools, right? The myth. So when a lot of people saying, oh, it's a myth, right? They're thinking from a post 1840, right? 1840. Let's bring this up right here. Let's go to mystery, right? Let's go to mystery. We have mystery in, Mark. We'll take Mark 4:11. Let's go to Mark 4:11. And here we go right here. It says right here, and he said to them, right? He said to them, to you, right? Not unto. Unto means not to.